Welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. I'm your host, Maria Angelova, creator of the Angelova method, an integrative approach to mind and body connection. The Angelova method redefines your success equation to include a healthy body and a healthy mind. Hi, Rebels, and welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. And today, your treat is Savio Clemente, who is a TEDx speaker who empowers people to share their story and live their best life. Welcome, Savio. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Maria. How are you? Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited you're here. Savio and I connected probably about a year ago, maybe longer. And Savio has an incredible story, which I'm sure we're going to dive into. But Savio, before that, give us 3 words and a little bit of a backstory so that we can get to know, like, who is really Savio? Like, who is the rebel Savio?
So 3 words to describe me would be definitely a lover of learning. I've had that innate ability to just consume knowledge and to try to apply knowledge. I would say another word that describes me is curious. Always been that guy, that person who was just quietly looking and observing and writing and knowing. And I would think the third one would probably be, as I've grown into an adult, would be compassionate. I've seen struggle, I've seen success. I know the vast difference between both of them. And I think the key here is to be compassionate and to understand where people are and to help them be the best versions of themselves.
I love it. I love it. I do have to say, I can relate to all three. I think the first two, the lifelong learner and the curiosity, kind of go hand in hand together because
Yeah.
I would tell you my journey into the body has been going for a long time. And the more I know, it's the more the more I know is the more I realize how much I don't know, right?
Yeah.
It's,
100%.
you go
100%.
into it and you're like, oh, I got that. And then the more you learn, you're like, wow, there's so much more to learn, right?
Well, and also, I think life, whatever you call it, life, God, universe, shows you avenues and paths, put things in your path to make you say, okay, are you going to stop learning? Are you going to just wait? Or are you going to do something with what was given to you? And I think that's where the interest in learning has always been fascinating for me because I learned through experience. Like, yeah, I like to read books. I like to research. I'm a journalist, but I love to have that experiential experience of really figuring out for myself, how does this apply to my life and how can I mirror that for other people?
Yeah, I think that is so important. And like what I tell people is what I'm teaching you is the road I have been on. So I didn't just read it in a book and like, let me teach it to you. Is I have personally experienced it in my body, in my life, in my mind, right? Okay, Savi, you shared the quote that we were just talking about before we popped on that I absolutely love. It resonates with me very much personally, and it's to know thyself is to heal thyself. I think that is so powerful. And to be honest with you, Savio, before I got on my personal journey, I had no idea how little I knew about myself. I mean, the more I go, I'm like, I'm 46 now, and I'm like, how is it possible that I made it to my 40s not knowing much about myself, just doing what I'm supposed to do, what I should do, how I should do it? Tell me, why is this resonating with you? What has your journey taught you?
Yeah. So the origin story of that quote is from an ancient saying. I think it has some biblical references to it. And for me, I echo it in my TEDx talk. I echo it in my book. But for me, it was really about this idea. So I'm a stage 3 cancer survivor. And for me, beyond that stage 3 cancer survivor, because of my interest and curiosity and my love of learning, I always knew that in order to understand the world and the people around me, I needed to understand myself. And how do you do that? You have to spend time with yourself. You have to get uncomfortable with yourself. You have to put yourself in situations that you might not safe situations, but put yourself in situations that you might not otherwise put yourself in.
Yes.
And for me, cancer really was just, Oprah Winfrey once called it a boulder hitting you. It was the boulder. It was stage 3. It was no joke. And I really figured out for myself, well, I need to figure out what I know about myself in order to actually heal myself because the doctors do their thing. That's wonderful. but that's not going to fix everything else that's happening within me, my emotions, my relationships, with other people. And so for me, that quote was just very paramount because it really taught me this idea that in order to figure out how you can live in the world, you need to know how to live with yourself.
Oh, that is so powerful. So as a stage 3 cancer survivor, I think unfortunately to many people healing, unless they hear a disease, they don't think of healing, right? It's a little bit easier to understand healing when there's cancer, where there is the disease, right? But if you're functioning fine, if life is good as you know it, people don't really think I need to heal. I think disease or something major that happens into our life, loss of a loved one, something that happens that shakes us up, creates urgency to question, like, what else is there? Like, what else is there to life? Like, what am I missing? And would you agree with that?
100%. I think life brings you on twists and turns. I have I have a niece and a nephew. They're just starting out in life, graduating college. And I say to them all the time, you follow the path that you want to follow, but just know life will test you. It will throw things in your way. It will give you happiness and abundance and joy. Enjoy those moments. Feel grateful for those moments. But just know that life is a series. A friend of mine calls it a job. I would agree to some degree it's a job. Some are harder than others, but it's really about figuring out for yourself as you move each day, what am I learning? What am I grasping at today? What has taught me to think differently about today or tomorrow or the next day? And I think once you catalog those things, it just enriches your life because you realize how far you've come. And I think growth is really the things that all of us should really look at rather than look at the disappointments or the pain or the suffering.
Yeah, the perspective that you take each and every day of whatever it is that's happening in our lives is a huge game changer. And I'll tell you, like, from an awareness standpoint, where I am now, only like 7 years later than when my entrepreneurial journey started, versus where I was before. Mind you, I was a salutatorian, I was highest honors, I was graduate school, right? Like all of those accolades.
Yeah.
And I thought, I got it, I know life. And life was like, let me show you. And it puts you on that journey that when you look at it backwards, you're like, holy cow, there was so much learning. And I do think life brings to us whatever we need to learn, sometimes in a more challenging ways than others, right? Disease, something like cancer. Um, and I think there's, like you said, there's so much personal growth that takes care. What would you say is the analogy between, because we're talking healing and we're talking about personal growth. So some people might be like, well, how are those related? What would you say to that?
Well, people look at disease and something as serious as mine as a deficit. And as much as it was hard and it was painful and family members and relatives were, consoling me, I knew for myself that even though my physical body was dying to a degree, I had other things going on. I had my really robust emotional side of me. I had that ability to trust in my spirituality. I had that ability to imagine. I had that ability to create. And I'm like, well, if I still can do these things or think about these things, even though I'm strapped to a hospital bed, given my first round of chemo in 15 days, what what is this telling me? It's telling me that I'm much more than my body. I am much more than what's laying in there. And I think the key there is to really figure out for yourself, what is your motivation? Like in coaching, I'm a board certified wellness coach. We talk a lot about the vision, not a goal, but the vision. How do you want to feel? How do you want to be in the world? How do you want people to perceive you? That's the vision. And so for me, I said to myself, okay, I'm in the hospital. Now it's day 13. I'm supposed to be here for another 2 more days. That's what they told me. I got to do these rounds of chemo. I'm going to follow my integrative, additional integrative modalities. And I'm going to really unearth and try to see what is life showing me? What is life teaching me? And some people, might not agree with that. But for me, after interviewing at this point, I've interviewed as a journalist, I've interviewed 200 cancer survivors. I understand where they're coming from because they're like, your care team was there for you when you were a patient, and now as a survivor, they're not. So now you have to really do the work on yourself because they were doing all these medical things, which is wonderful, but they weren't doing all these other internal things. And so I think the key there is to be really curious with yourself.
Yeah. And you made two great points. Is one, the healing starts from the inside out. I mean, yes, Western medicine is there to help us and support us, but there is also the healing that no doctor can do for you. You're the only one who can do it. And again, this is not only in the context of disease, right? This is on the context of every one of us dealing with life and how we look at everything that shows up in life, which is the other excellent point that you make, is that the things that happen to us, they're not failures. They're things that appear again into our life because there is a lesson for us to help us see, like, it changed your perception of what's happening inside me, my spirit, my soul, aside from my physical body.
Yeah, 100%. It's this idea that even though some of us might be broken, we're not forgotten. And the thing is, when these things happen to you, you forget a little bit about yourself. You left that self in a different room. I often say, Maria, that my cancer was blood cancer, so my scars are internal. You can't see them. But when I've interviewed breast cancer survivors and throat survivors and liver survivors and all these where they've lost body parts, you cannot pretend that's not there. It's not there anymore. So how do you live with yourself? And the way you live with yourself is to go deep within. To know thyself is to heal thyself. And that's the cornerstone that I like to really hone in my speaking engagements and my TED Talk as well.
Yeah. You know, I just yesterday posted something in regards to, I had recent surgery, elective surgery, so everything is great. That, you know, surgery is trauma for the body, and the recovery process, whether it's surgery or a disease condition, or even recovering from life, right? Maybe you went through trauma or anything like that. It's a process. It's not a one day flip over. And it's better if we start proactively addressing it, or it can show up later in life. It can show up as a disease, right? Because disease is the body not being at ease. And I also tell my clients is, if you keep suppressing emotions, which were not taught to you, referred to that a little bit earlier, because as a society, most of us are not taught to express our emotions, to feel our emotions. It's like, stuff it in and keep moving, right? You lose somebody, well, I'm too busy, I don't have time to deal with that. Well, that stuff I call it, gets stuck down the sewage system. If you don't clean up the sewage system, eventually, guess what? There will be an overflow and it's going to be stinky. So can you talk a little bit of that based again on your personal experience? I mean, you have dealt with something quite significant.
Yeah, I mean, not only personally, but professionally. I think most of this emotion, this lack of emotion talking is also cultural. Like I
Yeah.
come from an Asian Indian background. We don't talk about this kind of stuff. I mean, I think though the one positive thing out of social media is the access to content, access to information, access to tools, access to resources, access to people explaining their woulda, coulda, shouldas, their pains, their successes, their joys. And that creates the dialogue that allows people to feel, okay, I'm safe. I can consume this information. I can take this information. Although I will say, everyone on TikTok looks like an expert. They're not experts in everything, but I do appreciate the knowledge that they bring because it's up to us to sift through what makes sense and what doesn't, what applies and what doesn't. So I think really this idea of tapping into your emotions is not weak. I'm a male, right? I'm a cisgendered male. But for me, I like to really tell people all the time that emotions don't have to be something that's uncomfortable. It could be something that's normalized. And the way you do that is, the breakdown of emotions is energy in motion. That's what emotions are. And if you don't, like you said, let the sewer system seep in through, other channels, then it gets backed up and it becomes stinky thinking, as they say.
Yes. He also said, you mentioned energy, and I'm a huge fan of energy because I talk about energy all the time. And we know, if you become aware, you know how you're vibrating. Do you feel
100%.
like happy and elevated and energetic? Or do you feel like I need a cup of coffee and a Red Bull and something else to just keep me through the day, right? That is something else that is so key for us to become self-aware of. And also to pay attention to the things and people and the circumstances which are around us and the type of energy that they bring to us. And I don't know if you believe in that, the law of attraction, what you put out is what comes back. So if you have things and places and circumstances that come to you that you're like, I don't know why this keeps happening to me, I don't like that. Well, that's an opportunity for you to do some digging in.
Yeah.
We interrupt this episode with a very special announcement. Please join us for a wellness retreat in Bali in April 2024. Inner Alchemy, the art of living fully. For more info, check episode description.
Yeah, I think the key is that as individuals, we need to have a couple of non-negotiables. I know in America, the non-negotiable for most people is coffee, but I think we need to get a little deeper with the non-negotiables. For me, it's meditating. I've done it for over 20 years. Now it's 20 minutes. If I don't do it, to be honest with you, I don't feel great. I try to get it. Maybe I miss 2 or 3 times a year. That's it, because of my schedule.
Yeah.
And I think the other non-negotiable is really what I echoed in my TEDx talk. I talk about a framework of mine called the Aloha Reboot. And that's really this idea of acknowledgement. Acknowledge where you are in the present moment. Listen to your inner voice. Like, what's it actually saying to you? O is for open yourself up to those different channels, even those sensitive ones. And that's where kindness comes to yourself, because if you don't open up yourself, how can you be kind to other people if you're not kind to yourself? H stands for harnessing. So harness that wisdom from within. And then A, really just this idea of acting with purpose. And I really wanted to make it very simplified for people, because I think people think that you have to do, like, I'm part of this biohacking community. So cancer came into my life. I'm cancer-free. Now it's been 9 years. Wonderful. But I'm also a biohacker. I'm not extreme, but I'm a biohacker. And these people, I think you need to do red light and ice bathing. And great, if you could do that, if you could do, sauna immersion and infrared sauna, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But you don't need that. You need yourself. You need to be clear-minded. You need to be focused. And you need to be, as a client of mine once said, prayer is a way to tap into that energy source. It's not always about asking for things. It's about being in the right energy so that you're completely in tune and aligned.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. I do have to tell you, I tell people, I mean, I don't have any gadgets, measuring my temperature, weight, heart rate, sleeping patterns, any of that stuff. We have our body. Tune into yourself. How are you feeling in the morning? Are you tired? Did you rest well? Are you bloated? Right? We want the solution from somewhere else. And you already alluded to that. It's from the inside out. So yes, I mean, and I do have to tell you, I hear people like, I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing that. And I'm like, okay, are you seeing a difference? And it's not because they're not addressing the core causes, right? There is stuff inside that's not addressed. It's like we're trying to cover up the symptoms, but not what's the cause of all of those issues that are rising up. So
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it feels great, right? Do all the self-care that you want to do, but that does not substitute doing the internal work. And for me, like, what I preach to my clients is the basic pillars of health have not changed for thousands of years, and they will not change. I mean, yes, we have the new fat diet and we have the new exercise, and it's like, just move. We have so many modalities of exercise, and people nowadays move so much less than they did years before.
Yeah.
Why? Because we want the quick solution and we don't want to deal with the uncomfortable. So I'm so on board with what you said. And you said something, oh yes, I know. You said prayer is a way to connect to the higher source, whatever that is for you, God, universe. I say the same thing about gratitude. That's my thing, connect through gratitude, because even in the darkest of times, there is something, if you dig in, there is something to be grateful for.
100%. I mean, I say it all the time. I'm stage 3 cancer survivor. I could have been dead literally at 38. That's when cancer came into my life. So at this point, I'm grateful for where I'm at. I'm grateful that I'm doing the work that I am, because I basically coach cancer survivors on that journey of how to amplify their impact, tell their story, generate that new version of themselves that came from such a dark place. And something else that you mentioned that I really wanted to echo, I've been fortunate enough to be a journalist, a travel journalist, and it's wonderful flying to Italy, because I've gone to Mexico. I just came back from India with National Geographic. It's wonderful to experience these wellness fads and trends, but as well as I do, Maria, wellness in general was the basics. Drink water, get sunlight, move your body in some fashion, whether that's exercise or not, have some type of discipline, meditation, or some type of mantra or prayer, or whatever that is. Those were, and eat good food, right? Eat whole foods and balanced meal.
Well,
But
yeah.
now it's like $400 treatments and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed all of it. Like the 4-course meal, like when I went to I was invited to cover a wellness retreat in Italy, and I was expecting, I'm not kidding, like, just like healthy food. I did get it, but it was like so much food. And I asked them, they're like, no, we believe in indulgence. We believe in indulging the mind and the body and the physicality. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not going to complain. But I just had to say that because people think it's some elaborate thousands of dollars thing. And you'd have to do the basics. You can up level yourself. Wonderful. All of us want to do that. Have a spa treatment. Great. But you also have to balance that out with what's the work you're putting in on the inside, right? And I think a lot of us really are afraid to go in because there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of sorrow, there's a lot of stuff that's happened to us as children that we just don't want to
There is
unearth.
this
And that's,
comfort.
yeah, and that's uncomfortable. But like I mentioned before, the only way through something, the only way above something is through it. It's not around it. It's not behind you. It's
Yeah.
only through. So.
I can, having walked my path, I can completely agree with you. And like I said, I was not even aware, I talk to clients and they're like, before starting to work together, I didn't even realize how crappy I feel, because now they can compare to like, wow, I have energy. My back doesn't hurt. My neck doesn't hurt, right? Oh, I don't get pissed off at the little things that are really don't matter, right? I can show up better for my family, for my community. Their energy is different, right? To what we talked about before. And it changes your life. And then what is it? It's the basic. It's movement. It's moving in alignment, and also being in alignment with yourself, which unfortunately, I think for most of us, we don't even know what that means, because we just go, live, rush. What does alignment mean? And that's, the type of stuff that, I see exactly the same thing that you do, not with cancer patients, but with just regular people. So,
Yeah.
good stuff, Savio, good stuff.
Yeah.
We can keep talking, but for the sake of time, give us a piece of advice or a favorite quote you want to share. I know we already shared one.
I would say what I like to leave your listeners with is this idea that to really figure out what's happening in your life or what's going on in your life or what you want to create in your life, it always germinates from how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as that version? Do you see yourself as less than that version? And if you are, that's fine. It's okay, because it's a process, like you mentioned,
Yep.
and really trying to ferret out what's real, what's not. How can you take the semblances of wisdom and life experiences that you've taken? And really, I challenge everyone to use that Aloha reboot that I mentioned, because it really allows you to ask those deeper questions of yourself. And it does it in a way that it's not startling, it's not hard, it's not something that should take up too much of your time. It's something that is a process. And I really would say that that's my underlying message in general, is really that stuff happens to us. Crappy stuff happens to us. This is life. This is where we are. People call it a school of life, whatever you
Oh
want
my
to call
gosh,
it.
that is what I say. I say my school is the school of life. That's exactly what I say, Savio.
Yeah. And, it's really up to us to make it the best situation as possible, because, right? I had a pretty good upbringing. I wasn't bullied, thankfully. I didn't have all those issues, but these things happen to us when we grow up. And so as an adult, people think we need to stop, that school was then and we're done. No, school is continuing for us. We learn through relationships, we learn through ourselves, we learn through joy, we learn through sorrow, and that's what we're learning. And so I would echo that point very, very hard with your
It's
with your
so
listeners.
funny. I'm just going to share this with you, and maybe I've shared it on the podcast before. I don't remember, but when I first doing with one of my first coaches, when I started doing mindset coaching, right? And we start talking about childhood, and I was like, I had a very good, happy childhood, right? So I went to him after the session and I said, listen, all that stuff you talked about, I said, I don't have issues with that, but I was like, there is something else going on. And you can just tell you what my starting point was, right? I was so oblivious, is probably a great word to say.
Yeah.
And you know what? Life will be like, oh yeah, you think so? Let me show you a little bit more. So yes.
Yeah, Absolutely, 100%. And I think it behooves us as humans living on this planet in the time that we're living. There's a lot of challenges happening. There's a lot going on. And I think it behooves us to take a deep breath and to figure out for ourselves, what's the bind that connects us all? Because we're all here. People often talk about this idea of what's my purpose? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? And that's great, but look higher. Think about it, Maria. What's the purpose of all of us on this giant rock in space, floating, spinning? Think about it. And the reason why I say that is because people often look at just themselves in a situation rather than us as a collective. And I think once we do that, we tend to elevate the conversation and we tend to be kinder and gentler to other people. And I think that's what's missing. It's, we're polarized in so many ways. I have family members. I don't agree with them on a political spectrum, and that's fine. But I've learned as I've gotten older to just really accept people for who they are, and we can agree to disagree.
Yeah. I think that is such a key point that you make in the context of us healing as a society, because one, we are way more interconnected than ever before. And sometimes when people say, well, I don't care, that doesn't impact me. Oh, believe me, it does impact you, because we are all on the same place and our energy mingles, whether you realize it or not. And
Yep.
I think also as a society, to what you brought up, we have become so polarized to the point where we cannot respect another opinion. I mean, like you said, it's okay if we look at things differently. That is totally good. You have an opinion. That's called wealth, variety of opinions, right? And I think what people forget is that if we start fighting, you'll never change my mind if you start attacking me. I would never change your mind if I start attacking you. But when we can have a conversation and come from a place of compassion and respect, and realizing that we're interconnected and how can we solve this for all of us, that is a totally different standpoint than you're this, I'm this, he's this, she's this, right? And seeing the world through whatever colors we want to see them through: race, sexuality, nationality, and so forth.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time, even though we might not agree to disagree, as long as it's peaceful, right? As long as we don't hurt each other physically or hurt each other with words that can be, really debasing. And I think that's the key. As long as we understand the guardrails of what we can and can't do as people, then let people be, as long as they don't interfere with your own life, that's fine. But that's also where we're all called to learn more about life and situations. People change, thoughts change, circumstances change, perspectives change. I think we all need to be open with that idea. I tell people all the time, I'm a coach, but I coach myself because I can never be a good coach if I'm not doing what I say. And so for me, TEDx speaker now, board certified wellness coach, journalist, best-selling author, I'm showing you what's possible because I'm doing it myself as a survivor. And as survivors, we know that time is limited. Even though I'm remission, I get my scans every year. It's something that we have to just live with, and that's okay because that's a part of this crazy world called life.
Well, and I think my dad passed away when he was 48.
Oh.
I am now 46. He died from cancer, and I think regardless of what your health status is, I hear so often, oh, I'll do this when I retire. Oh, I'll do this when I get the promotion. Oh, I'll do this when the kids get out of. You don't know. No one of us knows when is the last day, regardless of our health condition. I mean, you hear people, one day they're healthy, next day they have a heart attack, and that's it. So savoring and grabbing life by the horns and really going with it, it's a very different experience.
Yeah. And I think it's also very important for people to sort of understand that we're not promised a bed of roses, none of us are. And I think, like you mentioned, we have to not only savor, but we have to think highly of ourselves and what is it, and ask ourselves, what do we really want? Because, things are changing, thankfully, in terms of social consciousness. But back in the day, right, we were told what our parents told us to do. We were told what the elders told us to do. And that's great. That had its place. But we're a growing society, right? There's a lot of access to information, access to other parts of the world that we never had access to. Literally within seconds, we can get that. And I think that should not allow us to detract as humans, but that should allow us to grow as humans, because then we can see, we can understand and be more empathetic, be more compassionate, be more understanding. Like going to India, I was in 9 cities. 9 cities. And it was just amazing. Even though my background is Indian, I haven't been to India in like 26 years. So seeing that, one of the kernel things I realized, Maria, is this idea of separateness. I'm not separate from their experience. Like, I'm talking about the Taj Mahal, the highest of opulence, to the lowest of lows, people living in basically like, shanty shacks. And I'm not separate from them. We're just living and coexisting in a different sphere. That's all it is. So I'm not more than them. I'm not less than them. We're just humans living and growing and evolving and just trying to make the best of what's given to us in this world.
Oh, that's exactly what I tell people. It's like, we are humans, and if we could look at each other as a human, aside from our characteristics, status, whatever else you want to layer on top, the world would be such an amazing and a different place, more compassionate, more happy place. I really agree with you on that.
Yeah. And I think that's where coming into yourself is, because when you get to know yourself, you realize that you have some stuff too that you got to work out. Like, you're judging other people and you're thinking, well, why is that triggering me? Well, what's in me that's triggering, And so for me, I had to do my own work in that whole area. It's not easy. I'm not telling you it's easy, but I think it's worth the investment. Don't you think?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I vouch, 2 hands up. My feet are underneath the desk, lift them too, but 100%. Experiencing life from this standpoint versus where I was before, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah. And a lot of people talk about, the circles, manifestation, and, the power of now. And those are great tools and resources, but they need to be applied in the real physical world. You need to have inspired action behind those tools and resources. If you don't have inspired action, nothing is going to happen.
That is what I say. Your life, nothing will change unless you take action. That is exactly what I say. So yeah, you can manifest and dream and do things, but if you don't take action, guess what? Then people say it doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work. And I mean, why do people not take action? Because it's uncomfortable, right?
And it requires work. It requires discipline. And there's no guarantee. There's never a guarantee in any of this stuff. No. But at the end of the day, I would rather try than not try.
Yeah, I'm with you. So that's a great piece of advice right there.
Yeah,
try,
absolutely.
Right? All right, Savio, what's your definition of rebellious?
Rebellious to me is seeing far more than what's presently happening in your life. So it's not fantasizing. The part of it is vision, but it's also sort of going against the norm and the grain of where other people's perceptions of what you're supposed to be are and where you think you're supposed to be in the present moment. So in other words, rebellious to me is shaking, back in the day, I think they still sell it. Like when you made chicken, you would have it's called shake and bake, where you would put all the contents in a bag and then you put the chicken in and you shake it and you shake it. And that's how I see as it's like this idea that you're continuously in motion of creating a new concoction, of creating a new sort of a fantastic dessert.
Oh, I like that. I like how you combine that with dessert. That's a favorite of mine. So beautiful combination.
Yeah.
Savio, where can people find you online, connect with you, ask you questions?
Sure. So they can go to my website. It's my name, Savio P. Clemente. So Savio P, my middle initial, Clemente, CLEMENTE.com. On that website, you can go and look at my coaching, look at my TEDx talk, which is called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And the inner stranger is all the things we talked about today, but what the inner stranger is and what helped me in my cancer journey is seeing myself outside of myself, being objective with myself and seeing what needs to be changed, what needs to learn, what do I need to grasp from this situation. And then I have coaching information there. And if you want to follow me on social media, it's at The Human Resolve.
At The Human Resolve. All right, awesome. Rebels, if you have any questions that you want to ask Savio, feel free to do that. Share this info with anybody that you think can benefit from it. And thank you for listening. Do make sure that you stay rebellious. Thank you, Savio.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy the conversation? Like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Want to redefine your success equation to include a healthy body and a healthy mind? Check out our website at rebellious-studio.com.